James Scora's comm device buzzed with an urgent message from his wife Elena, its contents threatening to upend both his marriage and the fragile human-Prilorian alliance. "Boron wants to join us in bed," Elena's words flashed across the screen, each syllable a potential diplomatic minefield. Stationed on the alien world of Priloria as one of the few human diplomats, James had grown accustomed to cultural misunderstandings. But this, his wife's Prilorian friend requesting to participate in their intimate activities, was unprecedented. He ran a hand through his hair, mind racing to process the implications. Prilorians viewed mating as a communal activity, a stark contrast to human norms. Boron's request, while shocking by Earth standards, likely seemed perfectly reasonable to her. James knew that rejecting her outright could offend their alien hosts, potentially jeopardizing the alliance humanity desperately needed. The stakes were astronomical. Prilorians possessed technology far beyond human capabilities, making them invaluable allies in humanity's push to explore the cosmos. Their world, with its swirling purple skies and crystalline cities, held secrets that could revolutionize human science and industry. But one wrong move, one cultural faux pas, and it could all come crashing down. James paced his office, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on him. The human presence on Priloria was tenuous at best. They'd been granted limited access in exchange for diplomatic and cultural exchange, a delicate balance that James was responsible for maintaining. As he contemplated his response to Elena, another message flashed across his screen. This one from his security team, marked urgent. A group of human extremists on Priloria were planning to sabotage the alliance. These radicals viewed any cooperation with aliens as a threat to human purity, their xenophobic ideology a powder keg waiting to explode. James felt the walls closing in. He now had to balance his personal predicament with Boron against the larger political implications of human-Prilorian relations, all while uncovering and stopping an extremist plot. And as if that weren't enough, a nagging suspicion began to form in the back of his mind. What if Boron's request wasn't as innocent as it seemed? The Prilorians were known for their subtle machinations. Could this be part of a deeper agenda to study human mating habits? And Elena, her message had seemed off somehow. A chilling thought struck him. Could his own wife be involved with the extremists? As James stood at the window, looking out over the alien landscape he'd come to call home, he realized the true weight of his position. His handling of Boron's proposal could have far-reaching consequences for humanity's future in the galaxy. One misstep could spark an interstellar conflict, dooming humanity's chances of peaceful coexistence with advanced alien races. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. James knew he would have to navigate this complex web of personal, political, and potentially dangerous circumstances with all the diplomatic skill he could muster. The fate of two species might well rest on his ability to handle an alien's unconventional bedroom request. James took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the comm device. He knew his response to Elena would set in motion a chain of events with far-reaching consequences. But before he could formulate a reply, the urgent message from his security team demanded his immediate attention. Pushing aside his personal dilemma for the moment, James opened the security briefing. His eyes widened as he read about the extremist plot. The situation had just become exponentially more complex. James's diplomatic instincts kicked in. He needed to address both issues simultaneously while maintaining the delicate balance of human-Prilorian relations. He quickly typed out a message to Elena. "We need to discuss this in person. Meet me at the Crystal Gardens in an hour." Next, he contacted Boron directly. "I'd like to speak with you about your request. Can we meet at the Crystal Gardens?" He hoped the public setting would provide a neutral ground for their sensitive conversation. As James made his way through the winding streets of the Prilorian capital, the swirling purple sky seemed to mirror his turbulent thoughts. The crystalline spires of the city glinted in the alien sunlight, a constant reminder of the advanced civilization humanity sought to ally with. Arriving at the gardens, James spotted Boron near a fountain of shimmering liquid that defied Earth's physics. Her iridescent skin reflected the surrounding colors, creating a mesmerizing display. "James," Boron greeted him, her multifaceted eyes blinking in a pattern he had learned to recognize as curiosity. "I appreciate you meeting with me." James nodded, choosing his words carefully. Born, I wanted to discuss your request. In human culture, mating and intimate relationships are typically private affairs between two individuals. Boron's skin rippled with interest. Fascinating. So humans do not engage in communal mating rituals? No, we don't, James explained, feeling a mix of awkwardness and professional detachment. Monogamy is the norm for many humans. Your request, while perfectly reasonable in Prilorian culture, would be considered inappropriate in ours. Boron's eyes widened in understanding. I see. I had no intention of causing discord, James. Thank you for explaining this cultural difference. As they continued their conversation, James noticed a group of humans lingering near a cluster of crystal formations. His diplomatic training kicked in, allowing him to observe them without drawing attention to himself. With a jolt, he recognized one of the men as Marcus Holt, a vocal anti-alien activist who had recently arrived on Priloria. James watched as Marcus and his associates huddled together, exchanging what appeared to be data chips with a Prilorian official. James's heart raced as he identified the Prilorian as Zex, a high-ranking member of the Planetary Defense Department. The implications of this meeting were staggering. Excusing himself from Boron, James discreetly followed the group, blending in with the crowd of humans and Prilorians enjoying the garden. He strained to catch snippets of their conversation, but the distance and ambient noise made it impossible. As the group dispersed, James retreated to a quiet corner of the garden. He needed to report this immediately. He opened a secure channel to Ambassador Richard Stern, his superior. Ambassador, I've just witnessed Marcus Holt and his associates meeting with Zex from Planetary Defense. They exchanged what looked like encrypted data chips. Stern's holographic image flickered with concern. This is troubling news, James. Continue monitoring the situation, but be cautious. We can't risk a diplomatic incident. James nodded, understanding the delicate nature of his position. What about Elena? Should I inform her of the situation? Stern's expression grew grave. For now, keep this information to yourself. We can't be certain of her involvement or lack thereof. As James ended the call, he saw Elena approaching. He steeled himself for a difficult conversation, unsure of how much to reveal. Before he could speak, his comm device buzzed again. It was Boron. James, I have another matter to discuss with you. It's of utmost importance to my species. James read Boron's message about the Prilorian reproductive crisis and her request for human DNA. The ethical implications made his head spin. How could he balance his duty to humanity with the potential to help their alien allies? As he contemplated this new dilemma, an urgent alert flashed across his device. The human embassy was calling all diplomatic staff to an emergency meeting. An unidentified ship was approaching Prilorian space. James looked up at Elena, who had just reached him. I'm sorry, but we'll have to talk later. There's an emergency at the embassy. Elena's expression was unreadable. Of course. Be careful, James. As he hurried towards the embassy, James's mind raced. The extremist plot, Boron's requests, Elena's potential involvement, and now an unknown ship. All these threads were converging into a tangled web of interstellar politics and personal loyalties. Entering the embassy's situation room, James found it buzzing with activity. Ambassador Stern stood at the center, his face grim. James, you're here. Good. The Prilorian High Council is demanding answers about this ship. We need you on the diplomatic team to address them. As James absorbed this new task, he noticed Zex enter the room, looking uncharacteristically agitated. The Prilorian's interest in the situation set off alarm bells in James's mind. James leaned close to Stern, keeping his voice low. Sir, I think we should investigate Zex's communications and movements. There might be a connection between him, the extremists, and this ship. Stern nodded imperceptibly. Agreed. I'll put our intelligence team on it. For now, focus on the council meeting. We need to assure them this isn't a human vessel. As James prepared for the High Council meeting, he felt the weight of multiple worlds on his shoulders. The fate of human-Prilorian relations hung in the balance, and he was walking a tightrope between diplomacy and investigation. The council chambers loomed ahead, their crystalline doors reflecting the tension in the air. James straightened his uniform, knowing that his next words could shape the future of interstellar relations. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay beyond those doors. As James stepped into the council chambers, the air crackled with tension. The crystalline walls seemed to amplify the anxious murmurs of the assembled human and Prylorian officials. At the center of the room, a holographic display showed the unidentified ship orbiting Pryloria, its sleek form a stark contrast to the familiar vessels of both species. Ambassador Stern caught James's eye and nodded, silently urging him to take his place at the diplomatic table. As James settled into his seat, he noticed Zex enter the chamber, the Prylorian's iridescent skin flickering with what James had come to recognize as agitation. The head of the Prylorian High Council, a statuesque figure named Vox, called the meeting to order. "We face an unprecedented situation," Vox's melodious voice resonated through the chamber. "An unknown vessel has entered our space without authorization. We must decide on a course of action." Before anyone else could speak, Zex surged forward, his multifaceted eyes flashing. "The answer is clear," he declared, his translator struggling to keep up with his rapid speech. "We must strike now, before this intruder can pose a threat to our world." A chorus of agreement rose from several Prylorian officials, their skin pulsing with vibrant hues of aggression. James felt the delicate balance of diplomacy tipping dangerously. "If I may," James interjected, rising to his feet. All eyes turned to him, a mix of curiosity and suspicion in both human and alien gazes. "While the situation is indeed serious, we must not act rashly. Our first step should be to attempt communication with the vessel. They may have peaceful intentions, or perhaps they're in distress." Zex's skin darkened with what James interpreted as frustration. "And if they are hostile, we would be wasting precious time while they prepare to attack." James held his ground. "If they meant us harm, they could have attacked already. Their restraint suggests other motives." As the debate intensified, James felt his personal device vibrate against his wrist. Glancing down discreetly, he saw an encrypted message flash across the screen. The sender's name made his heart skip a beat. Captain Lyra. James's mind raced. He needed to read this message, but leaving the council meeting now would be suspicious. He caught Ambassador Stern's eye and gave a subtle nod toward the door. Stern understood immediately. He stood, his authoritative presence silencing the room. "Our human delegation needs a moment to confer. We request a brief recess." Vox considered for a moment, then acquiesced with a graceful gesture. "Very well, we shall reconvene in 15 minutes. As the chamber erupted into a buzz of private conversations, James slipped out, his pulse quickening with each step. He made his way to a secure communication center, ensuring he wasn't followed. Once inside, James activated the privacy shields and opened the message. Captain Lyra's words made his breath catch in his throat. Human Prylorian hybrids? A secret genetic experiment? The implications were staggering. James's fingers flew over the console as he established a secure channel with the orbiting ship. Moments later, Captain Lyra's face appeared on the screen, her features a striking blend of human and Prylorian characteristics. "Diplomat Scora," she greeted him, her voice carrying an otherworldly lilt. "I appreciate your discretion in this matter." "Captain Lyra," James replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Your message, if what you're saying is true, it changes everything." Lyra nodded solemnly. The hybrid program began as a collaborative effort between human scientists and Prylorian geneticists. They believed combining our DNA could lead to remarkable advancements for both species. But when they discovered the potential solution to the Prylorian reproductive crisis, certain factions saw an opportunity for power. James's mind whirled with the implications. "And now you've brought the hybrids here?" "We had no choice," Lyra explained. "Both human and Prylorian extremists were closing in on us. We need protection and a chance to present our case to both governments." Before James could respond, alarms blared throughout the building. He looked at Lyra in alarm. "What's happening?" Her expression grew grim. "We've begun our descent. I'm sorry, but we couldn't wait any longer. We're landing in a remote area outside the city." James ended the communication and raced back to the council chamber. Inside, he found chaos. Zex was at the center, his voice rising above the din. "We must strike now. Destroy the ship before it can land." In that moment, James saw Elena enter the room, accompanied by Marcus Holt. The sight of his wife with the known anti-alien activists confirmed his worst fears about her involvement with the extremists. James knew he had to act fast. The fate of two species and the future of interstellar relations hung in the balance. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the pandemonium. "Members of the council," he began, his tone commanding attention. "I have crucial information about the ship and its occupants." All eyes turned to him, a hush falling over the room. James took a deep breath, knowing his next words would irrevocably alter the course of human-Prylorian relations. "The ship carries human-Prylorian hybrids," he announced, his words sending shockwaves through the assembled officials. "They are the result of a joint scientific endeavor, and they may hold the key to solving the Prylorian reproductive crisis." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, but James pressed on, outlining his proposal for a diplomatic mission to meet with Captain Lyra and the hybrids. As he spoke, he noticed Zex's agitation growing, the Prylorian official's skin pulsing with dark, ominous colors. James concluded his proposal, his heart pounding as he awaited the council's response. The fate of two worlds now rested on their decision, and on his ability to navigate the treacherous waters ahead. James's proposal hung in the air, the council chamber vibrating with tension. Before anyone could respond, a piercing alarm shattered the silence. Ambassador Stern's communicator flashed urgently. "We've received word," Stern announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The ship has begun its descent. It's landing in a remote area outside the city." The chamber erupted into pandemonium. Zex's voice rose above the din, calling for immediate military action. James caught Elena's eye across the room, her presence alongside Marcus Holt, confirming his suspicions about her involvement with the extremists. "We don't have time for debate," James declared, seizing control of the situation. "I propose an immediate diplomatic mission to the landing site. We need to make first contact before anyone else does." Vox, the head of the Prylorian High Council, nodded in agreement. "Diplomat Skora will lead a joint human-Prylorian team to the landing site. You have our authority to negotiate on behalf of both our peoples." James quickly assembled his team, 2 human diplomats and 3 Prylorian officials. As they hurried to their transport, James noticed Zex slipping away, his skin pulsing with dark, agitated colors. The journey to the landing site was fraught with tension. As they neared their destination, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Jagged rock formations and dense alien vegetation forced them to abandon their vehicles and continue on foot. "We're losing valuable time," one of the Prylorian officials hissed, his translator struggling to convey his frustration. James pressed on, his mind racing. He knew Zex had a head start, and every moment counted. The fate of 2 species hung in the balance. As they crested a final ridge, James's heart sank. In the clearing below, Zex stood in animated conversation with a striking figure who could only be Captain Lyra. Even from a distance, her hybrid features were apparent. The iridescent skin of a Prylorian combined with distinctly human facial structures. James approached cautiously, catching snippets of their conversation. "Unlimited power and influence within Prylorian society," Zex was saying, his voice low and persuasive. Lyra's expression was guarded, but James could see a flicker of interest in her eyes. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Captain Lyra," he called out, drawing their attention. "I'm diplomat James Skora, the official representative of the joint human-Prylorian diplomatic mission." Lyra turned to face him, her hybrid features even more striking up close. "Diplomat Skora," she acknowledged, her voice carrying an otherworldly lilt. "Your colleague here was just explaining the opportunities available to us on Pryloria." James shot Zex a warning glance before addressing Lyra. "I'm afraid Zex doesn't speak for our governments. We're here to welcome you and your people, and to discuss how we can work together for the benefit of all our species." Before Lyra could respond, a commotion erupted from the nearby tree line. A group of armed humans emerged, led by Marcus Holt. James recognized the anti-alien activist from their previous encounter in the gardens. "Step away from the abominations," Holt shouted, raising a weapon. "We won't allow these genetic monstrosities to contaminate our world." In an instant, the clearing became a powder keg. Zex's Prylorian supporters took defensive positions, while Lyra barked orders to her hybrid crew. James found himself at the center of a three-way standoff, with the fate of interspecies relations hanging by a thread. "Everyone, stand down," James commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his diplomatic authority. "We're here to talk, not fight. Captain Lyra and her people have come seeking asylum and cooperation. We owe it to them and to ourselves to hear them out." The tension in the air was palpable. James could see fingers tightening on triggers, Prylorian skin flickering with aggressive colors. He held his breath, praying his words would be enough to prevent bloodshed. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the standoff. "James!" Elena emerged from the tree line, her face flushed from exertion. "I have critical information about Zex's plans," she announced, her eyes locking with James's. "He intends to use the hybrid's unique genetic makeup to create a breed of super soldiers. It could destabilize the entire power balance between humans and Prylorians." Zex's skin darkened with rage. "Lies!" he hissed, but James could see doubt creeping into the eyes of his Prylorian supporters. Before anyone could react, a cry of pain came from the hybrid ship. James turned to see several of Lyra's crew doubled over, their skin taking on an alarming pallor. "What's happening to them?" James demanded, moving closer despite the weapons trained on him. Lyra's face was etched with concern. "It's the atmosphere. Something about it is affecting our physiology. We need medical attention, quickly." In that moment, James saw an opportunity. He raised his voice, addressing all factions present. "Look around you. While we argue, innocent lives are at risk. Whatever our differences, can we not agree that the well-being of these people must come first?" His words seemed to penetrate the fog of hostility. Slowly, weapons lowered. Even Marcus Holt's expression softened as he watched the hybrid's obvious distress. "We need to establish a medical facility immediately," James continued, seizing the moment. "Humans, Prylorians, hybrids, we all have skills that can help. Who's with me?" One by one, individuals from each group stepped forward. James caught Elena's eye, seeing a mixture of pride and something else, regret perhaps, in her gaze. As they began to work together, setting up makeshift medical equipment and tending to the ailing hybrids, James felt a glimmer of hope. He approached Lyra, who was overseeing the care of her crew. "Captain," he said softly, "once this immediate crisis is under control, we have much to discuss. I believe your people may hold the key to solving problems that have long plagued both humans and Prylorians." Lyra nodded, a look of cautious optimism on her face. "Perhaps this unfortunate incident will prove to be a new beginning for all our species," she replied. As James turned to coordinate the expanding medical efforts, he caught sight of Zex slinking away from the group. The Prylorians' defeat was clear, but James knew this was a long way to go. New challenges loomed on the horizon, integrating the hybrids, navigating interspecies politics, and unraveling the full extent of the extremist plans. For now, though, James focused on the task at hand. As humans, Prylorians, and hybrids worked side by side to save lives, he allowed himself a moment of cautious hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since this crisis began, it seemed that a peaceful resolution might be possible. But James knew the challenges were not nearly finished. As the medical efforts stabilized, James's communicator buzzed with an urgent message. His face paled as he read the contents. "We have a new problem," he announced, drawing the attention of those nearby. "A human military fleet is en route to Pryloria. They're responding to reports of the hybrid ship's arrival." Captain Lyra's eyes widened. "How long do we have?" "Hours at most," James replied, his mind racing. "We need to act fast to prevent a potential catastrophe." James quickly assembled a core group, including Captain Lyra, Vox from the Prylorian High Council, and Elena. We need to present a unified front, he explained. I'm calling an emergency meeting with key human and Prilorian officials. Captain Lyra, your presence will be crucial. As they hurried to the hastily arranged meeting site, James outlined his plan. We'll create a visible display of unity, he said. A mixed fleet of human, Prilorian, and hybrid ships to greet the incoming human forces. It's a risk, but it's our best chance to show our peaceful intentions. The emergency meeting was a flurry of activity. James's diplomatic skills were pushed to their limits as he navigated the complex web of interspecies politics. He presented his plan, emphasizing the potential for disaster if they failed to act. This is madness, one human official protested. We can't risk our ships in such a display. Vox, the Prilorian representative, countered, the alternative is potential war. We must take this chance. As the debate raged, Elena pulled James aside. James, Boron and I have made a breakthrough, she whispered urgently. We've found a way to stabilize the hybrid genome. It could solve the Prilorian reproductive crisis. James's eyes lit up. That's exactly what we need. This could be the key to convincing both sides of the benefits of cooperation. With renewed energy, James returned to the negotiations. He incorporated the news of the genetic breakthrough, painting a picture of a future where humans and Prilorians could both benefit from hybrid-derived technologies. Gradually, resistance to the plan weakened. As the meeting concluded, James had secured tentative agreement from both human and Prilorian officials to proceed with the welcoming fleet. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. James coordinated with Prilorian military leaders and Captain Lyra to assemble their impromptu armada. Ships from all three species moved into formation, creating a striking visual representation of unity. As they prepared to intercept the incoming human fleet, James boarded the lead ship alongside Captain Lyra and key Prilorian officials. The bridge hummed with tension as they approached the rendezvous point. Incoming transmission from the human fleet, a communications officer announced. James took a deep breath. On screen, he ordered. The stern face of Admiral Jones appeared before them. This is Admiral Jones of the Earth Defense Fleet. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. James stepped forward. Admiral Jones, I'm diplomat James Scora. We come in peace representing a joint human-Prilorian hybrid delegation. We request the opportunity to present you with crucial information before any actions are taken. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. You have 1 minute to explain why I shouldn't order my fleet to open fire, diplomat Scora. James launched into a concise but impassioned explanation, outlining the situation with the hybrids and the potential benefits of cooperation. He transmitted the newly drafted cooperation agreement and the genetic research findings to the Admiral's ship. I urge you to review this information, Admiral, James concluded. The future of interspecies relations hangs in the balance. Admiral Jones's expression remained impassive. Stand by, he said curtly, cutting the transmission. The minutes that followed were agonizing. James paced the bridge, acutely aware of the destructive potential that surrounded them. Suddenly, alarms blared across the ship. Multiple ships in our fleet are moving out of formation, a Prilorian officer shouted. Captain Lyra's face contorted with worry. They're on an attack vector towards the human fleet. James's mind raced. It's Zex, he realized aloud. He must have infiltrated our communication systems. With no time to lose, James sprang into action. He worked feverishly with Captain Lyra and the Prilorian technicians to isolate and neutralize Zex's false commands. All the while, he maintained an open channel to Admiral Jones, desperately trying to prevent a catastrophic misunderstanding. Admiral, please hold your fire, James pleaded. We're experiencing a sabotage attempt by a rogue element. Give us a moment to regain control. The tension on the bridge was palpable as they worked to contain the crisis. James's heart pounded in his chest, knowing that a single mistake could spark an interstellar war. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they managed to neutralize Zex's influence. The rogue ships returned to formation, crisis averted by the narrowest of margins. James wiped sweat from his brow as he addressed Admiral Jones once more. Admiral, The situation is under control. In light of what just happened, I have a proposal. I invite you to board our ship personally for face-to-face negotiations. It's the best way to provide irrefutable evidence of our intentions and the potential benefits of cooperation." There was a long pause as Admiral Jones considered the offer. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, Diplomat Skora. I'll accept your invitation. But be warned, any hint of deception will be met with the full force of my fleet." As preparations began for the Admiral's arrival, James received word that Elena's team had successfully apprehended Zex. With the immediate threats neutralized, James allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. The future was far from certain, but for the first time since this crisis began, James could see a path forward, a path that might lead to lasting peace between humans, Prilorians, and hybrids. As he prepared to welcome Admiral Jones aboard, James steeled himself for the challenging negotiations ahead, knowing that the fate of 3 species now rested on his diplomatic skills. As Admiral Jones's shuttle docked with the hybrid ship, James took a deep breath, steeling himself for the crucial negotiations ahead. The fate of 3 species hung in the balance, and he knew that every word, every gesture, would be scrutinized. The next few hours passed in a blur of intense discussions, presentations, and debates. James, alongside Captain Lyra and key Prilorian officials, laid out their vision for a cooperative future. They presented evidence of the genetic breakthrough, demonstrating the potential benefits for all species involved. Admiral Jones listened intently, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of humanity's future. "Diplomat Skora, I must admit that your proposal is intriguing. The potential benefits are undeniable, but the risks are equally significant." James leaned forward, his voice steady. "Admiral, I understand your concerns, but I believe the greater risk lies in maintaining the status quo. We have an unprecedented opportunity here to forge a new path, one that could lead to prosperity and advancement for all our peoples." As the negotiations continued, James could see the Admiral's resistance beginning to crumble. By the time they concluded, a tentative agreement had been reached. The human fleet would stand down, and a joint task force would be established to oversee the integration of the hybrids and the implementation of the new cooperation initiatives. In the weeks that followed, James found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. The successful negotiations had set in motion a series of events that would reshape the relationships between humans, Prilorians, and hybrids. The day of the official announcement arrived, and James stood before a massive assembly of all 3 species. The air crackled with anticipation as he stepped up to the podium. "Today," James began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "we stand on the brink of a new era, an era of cooperation, mutual understanding, and shared progress. The Interspecies Cooperative Council is more than just an organization. It's a symbol of our commitment to a future where our differences are not barriers, but strengths." As James continued his speech, he could see the impact of his words rippling through the audience. Humans and Prilorians exchanged glances, some wary, others hopeful. The hybrids, standing tall and proud, seemed to embody the potential of this new alliance. With the formal establishment of the ICC, James found himself thrust into the role of its first human chairperson. The position came with immense responsibilities, and he threw himself into the work with characteristic willpower. One of James's first initiatives was the creation of mixed-species neighborhoods on Priloria. He moved into one of these areas himself, believing that personal example was the most powerful form of leadership. His new home was a modest dwelling, deliberately designed to blend human and Prilorian architectural styles. As James unpacked his belongings, he couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement mingled with apprehension. The success of this experiment could set the tone for future integration efforts. Over the next few months, James worked tirelessly to implement a series of cultural exchange programs. He organized joint cultural festivals, established mixed-species educational institutions, and encouraged collaborative research projects. One evening, as James was reviewing reports in his office, a familiar face appeared at his door. It was Elena, her eyes bright with excitement. "James, you need to see this," she said, handing him a data pad. "The results from our latest trials are beyond our wildest expectations. The hybrid genetic sequences are proving to be the key to solving the Prilorian reproductive crisis. James scanned the report, his heart racing. This was the breakthrough they had been hoping for. This is incredible, Elena. We need to scale up the program immediately. As they discussed the implications of the research, James couldn't help but notice the way Elena's eyes lit up when she spoke about the work. There was a connection between them, a shared passion for making a difference. However, James's personal life was about to become considerably more complicated. Later that week, during a late-night strategy session with Captain Lyra, he found himself drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. As they pored over star charts and population distribution models, James became acutely aware of Lyra's presence. The subtle shimmer of her skin, the intelligence in her eyes, the persistence in her voice, it all combined to create an undeniable attraction. Before he fully realized what was happening, James found himself leaning towards Lyra. Their eyes met, and for a moment the rest of the universe seemed to fade away. Their lips were just about to meet when a gasp from the doorway shattered the moment. Elena stood there, a look of shock and hurt on her face. Without a word, she turned and fled, leaving James torn between his growing feelings for Lyra and his deep connection with Elena. As James grappled with his personal dilemma, a new challenge arose. Admiral Jones requested a private meeting, his face grim as he outlined his concerns about the long-term implications of the integration efforts. "Diplomat Scora," the Admiral said, his voice low and serious. "I fear we may be moving too fast. The potential for genetic drift, for the loss of what makes each of our species unique, it's a risk we can't ignore." James listened carefully, acknowledging the validity of the Admiral's concerns, while also emphasizing the potential benefits of their current path. It was a delicate balance, one that would require careful navigation in the days to come. As if the situation wasn't complex enough, a new variable entered the equation. The ICC received an unexpected transmission from deep space, first contact with a previously unknown alien species. The message was brief but clear. The aliens had observed the unique society developing on Priloria and wished to establish diplomatic relations. The news sent shockwaves through the ICC, with each species reacting differently to the prospect of this new contact. James knew that their response to this situation could make or break the fragile alliance they had built. He immediately began assembling a diverse team to develop a unified approach, including Elena and Lyra, despite the personal tension between them. As preparations for the alien delegation's arrival intensified, James received an urgent message from Baron. The Prilorian scientist had uncovered troubling intelligence suggesting that the new alien species might have hostile intentions. James stared out of the window of his office, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. The fledgling society he had helped build faced threats from within and without. The arrival of the alien delegation loomed on the horizon, bringing with it the potential for either unprecedented cooperation or devastating conflict. He turned back to his desk, where reports, strategies, and personal conflicts awaited his attention. The path ahead was uncertain, but James was determined to face each challenge head-on. The future of human-Prilorian hybrid relations, and perhaps the fate of their entire world, depended on it. James's contemplation was abruptly interrupted by a series of urgent alerts flashing across his communication device. He swiftly accessed the incoming messages, his eyes widening as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. Boron's face appeared on the screen, his usually calm demeanor replaced by visible agitation. "James, we've uncovered troubling intelligence about the alien delegation. There's reason to believe their intentions may be hostile." James's pulse quickened. He immediately initiated a secure call to Admiral Jones and Captain Lyra. "Emergency meeting in the ICC war room now," he ordered, his voice taut with urgency. Within minutes, James found himself surrounded by a tense group of human and Prilorian military leaders. Admiral Jones's weathered face was set in grim lines as James relayed Boron's intelligence. "We can't take any chances," the Admiral declared. "We need to activate our defenses immediately." Captain Lyra nodded in agreement. "The planetary shield system. It's our best option, even if it's not fully tested." James quickly made the decision. "Agreed. Assemble a team of our best hybrid engineers. We need that shield operational before the aliens arrive. As the meeting dispersed, James's communication device buzzed again. A live feed showed a massive crowd gathering outside the ICC headquarters. Angry chants and waving signs filled the screen. The anti-integration protesters, James muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. He watched in horror as a group of extremists suddenly surged forward, attempting to breach the building's security perimeter. Without hesitation, James authorized the deployment of a mixed human-Prylorian security force. The ensuing clash was brief but intense. The sound of stun weapons and shouts filled the air as the security team subdued the most aggressive protesters. James winced as he watched several individuals, both human and Prylorian, being led away in restraints. The sight of injuries on both sides sent a pang through his chest. This was exactly the kind of conflict he had been working so hard to prevent. As if the situation wasn't stressful enough, Elena burst into his office, her face a mask of hurt and anger. "James, we need to talk. Now." James braced himself, knowing this conversation was long overdue. "Elena, Save it," she cut him off. "I can't do this anymore. The way things are between us, between you and Lyra, I'm considering resigning from the hybrid research team." James felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. "Elena, please. We need you. The entire project depends on your expertise." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't work like this, James. It's too painful." Before James could respond, another alert blared through the building. The planetary shield was being activated for its first full-scale test. James and Elena rushed to the nearest window, watching as a shimmering energy field began to materialize in the sky above. For a moment, it seemed to be working perfectly. Then, without warning, the lights in the building flickered and died. Outside, they could see entire sections of the city plunging into darkness. "The shield's causing massive power outages," James realized aloud. He turned to Elena, his expression pleading. "I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. But right now, we need to focus on the bigger picture. Will you help us fix this?" Elena hesitated, conflict clear on her face. Finally, she nodded. "For the sake of the project, not for you." As they hurried to join the engineering team, James's communication device chimed once more. It was Admiral Jones. "Skora, we need to talk about the hybrids," the Admiral's voice was gruff. "I think we should consider using them as our frontline defense against the aliens." James felt a chill run down his spine. "You want to weaponize them? Admiral, we can't—" "They're our best chance, Skora. Their adaptability could be the key to our survival." The conversation ended abruptly as James entered the engineering control room. The atmosphere was chaotic, with humans, Prylorians, and hybrids, all working frantically to stabilize the planetary shield. As James began coordinating the efforts to restore power to the affected areas, a message flashed across his personal communicator. His blood ran cold as he read the sender's name. Zex. "I have information about the aliens," the message read. "Information you need. Meet with me." James stared at the screen, his mind racing. Could he trust Zex, or was this another ploy? Before he could ponder further, long-range sensor data began pouring in. James's heart sank as he processed the information. What they had thought was a small delegation was in fact a massive fleet of alien vessels, far more than they had anticipated. In that moment, James knew they were out of time. He turned to the assembled team, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Listen up," he announced. "I'm assembling a first contact team. We're going to meet these aliens before they reach Pryloria. It's our best chance to assess their intentions and negotiate from a position of strength." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, James caught Elena's eye. She nodded almost imperceptibly, a silent agreement to put aside their personal issues for now. James took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. With potential invasion looming, internal conflicts threatening to tear their fledgling society apart, and crucial decisions weighing on his shoulders, he knew that the coming hours would determine the fate of not just Pryloria, but potentially all three species. As he began selecting members for the first contact team, James couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of a new era, one that could bring either unprecedented cooperation or devastating conflict. The only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same again. As James began selecting members for the first contact team, a surge of commitment coursed through him. He knew that the fate of Priloria and all three species hung in the balance. With a nod to Elena and Lyra, he set the wheels in motion for their daring mission. Within hours, their ship, a marvel of hybrid human-Prilorian engineering, stood ready on the launch pad. Its sleek lines and pulsing energy conduits reflected the best of both species' technologies. James took a deep breath as he stepped aboard, followed by his carefully chosen team. Elena, representing the scientific contingent, Lyra for her military expertise, and a select group of human, Prilorian, and hybrid specialists. As the ship's engines roared to life, James gazed out at the shimmering, half-functional planetary shield. "Initiating launch sequence," Lyra announced from the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The vessel rose smoothly, accelerating through the atmosphere. A brief flicker of resistance signaled their passage through the shield, and then they were free, speeding towards the outer reaches of the Prilorian system. As they approached the coordinates where long-range sensors had detected the alien fleet, tension mounted on the bridge. James stood at the fore, his eyes fixed on the interface. Suddenly, a massive ship materialized before them, dwarfing their vessel. "Incoming transmission," Elena reported, her voice steady despite the circumstances. James nodded. "Put it through." The view screen flickered, revealing a being unlike any they had encountered before. The alien's features were angular, with iridescent skin and large luminous eyes. "I am Zelana, commander of the Jarn fleet." The alien spoke, its voice resonating with a musical quality. James stepped forward. "I am James Scora, representing the United Peoples of Priloria. We've come to understand your intentions and, if possible, negotiate peaceful terms." Zelana's eyes narrowed slightly. "You show great courage, James Scora. We are the Jarans, and we have been observing your unique society with great interest." As the conversation unfolded, James's diplomatic skills were put to the test. He learned of the Jarans' isolationist history and the genetic crisis that had driven them from their seclusion. With each exchange, he could sense the desperation behind Zelana's carefully measured words. "Our scientists have made a breakthrough," James said, seizing an opportunity. "We believe our research into hybrid genetics could hold the key not only to our own challenges, but to yours as well." Zelana's expression shifted, a flicker of hope crossing their features. "You would share such knowledge?" "We propose more than that," James replied. "We envision a coalition of our four species, pooling our resources and expertise for mutual benefit." The Jarn commander fell silent, clearly weighing the proposal. After what seemed like an eternity, Zelana spoke. "We accept a trial period of cooperation. Let us proceed to your world and discuss the terms in detail." As the combined fleet set course for Priloria, James received an urgent communication from Admiral Jones. "Scora, we have a situation. The traditionalist faction is making a move on the planetary shield control center. They're trying to lock out the Jarran ships." James's mind raced. He quickly conferred with Lyra and Elena, formulating a plan. "Elena, you have insight into the extremist group. What's their likely approach?" Elena's brow furrowed in concentration. "They'll try to overload the shield generators, creating a cascade failure. It's risky, but it would effectively seal off the planet." "Then that's where we need to be," James decided. He turned to Zelana, explaining the situation and requesting their patience. As their ship touched down near the shield control center, chaos erupted around them. Protesters clashed with security forces, while alarms blared from the facility. James, Lyra, and Elena pushed through the crowd, using their combined authority to gain entry. Inside, they found Vex, the charismatic Prilorian leader of the traditionalist faction, hunched over a control panel. His fingers flew across the interface, initiating the overload sequence. "Vex, stop!" James called out, his voice cutting through the din. "This isn't the way." The Prilorian turned, his eyes wild with fear and desperation. "We can't let them land, Scora. They'll destroy everything we've built." James took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. I understand your fear, Vex. Change is frightening, especially on this scale. But isolating ourselves isn't the answer. The Jarns aren't here to conquer. They need our help, just as we need theirs. Vex hesitated, his hand hovering over the final command. James pressed on, his voice gentle but firm. Think about the potential benefits of this cooperation. New medical treatments, technological advancements, cultural exchanges. We have a chance to be part of something truly extraordinary. The tension in the room was palpable as Vex struggled with his decision. Finally, his shoulders slumped, and he stepped away from the controls. I hope you're right, Skora, for all our sakes. With the immediate crisis averted, James and his team worked quickly to stabilize the shield and prepare for the Jarn landing. As the first alien ships touched down on Prylorian soil, a new chapter in their shared history began to unfold. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. A historic summit was convened, bringing together representatives from all four species. James found himself at the center of it all, guiding discussions, mediating disputes, and helping to shape the framework of their new alliance. As the summit neared its conclusion, James stood before the assembled delegates, ready to deliver the speech of his life. He looked out at the sea of faces, human, Prylorian, hybrid, and Jarn, and felt a profound sense of hope for their shared future. Today, we stand on the threshold of a new era, James began, his voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. An era defined not by our differences, but by our shared aspirations and our willingness to embrace the unknown.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.